Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, we're here with Carleton University's Philippe Lagassé. He has written a lot about the National Security and Intelligence Committee parliamentarians. We are in a particularly interesting place with that report on foreign interference right now and the reactions to it. I know Phil has had some experience with previous NSICOP reports. So I guess why don't we just start with placing this report in the context of previous reports from this committee?
Thanks, Dale. So I think it's an interesting context in this one. NSICOP has been fairly bold in the past, and it hasn't shied away from being prescriptive and making its views known. So I'm a little surprised by silent wouldn't be the right word, but just the hesitance
Mhm.
that the committee's seeming to indicate here when it comes to kind of bolstering or explaining what they were hoping to do. I was particularly struck by David McGinty's comments that they don't have a message that they try and convey in their reports, since that doesn't align with things they've done in the past.
Yeah.
In the past, they've had a clear message. As well, the idea that they don't do comms and that's not their thing. Yeah, I would contrast that with how effective the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency manages these things, which tends
Mhm.
to lead me to think that maybe they need to bolster that comms capacity if they're going to come out with reports like this.
I have to wonder if the reluctance to really say anything about this has to do with internal tensions within the committee in terms of this is as much as they could agree to saying publicly, because it is such a multi-partisan environment.
That's possible. We don't know. But I have difficulty still if they came up with a unanimous report,
Mhm.
and if they were able to land on some basic language within the report, you would still hope that there'd be some effort on the part of the chair at the very least to better explain what exactly is being said here.
Right.
I feel that this is sapping the committee of a bit of its strength at this point, if it doesn't seem like it's able to better explain itself and stand up to direct critiques on the part of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety, which is interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have to also kind of wonder in terms of those critiques. I'm finding a bit hard to, with some of the commentary out there with people saying, "Well, the prime minister said that this committee was well placed to investigate this, but now they're disputing the findings." And I just find the fact that they're disputing this to be somewhat like trying to hold two separate thoughts at the same time. It's like, yes, the committee can be well placed, but you can dispute some of what they find. Am I getting am I reading this wrong here, or?
No, I think what you're doing is demanding too much nuance and reality out of life. Is the committee well placed to do this type of work? Yes. Does that mean that you always have to agree with them? No. And I think that's where the tension is arising. We have a tendency in Canada to create either officers of parliament or panels or committees and then imbue them almost like Moses coming down from the mountain with the tablets. And that's it's not to say that that they haven't done a good job. I
Mhm.
don't know. I haven't read the report, but it's not unexpected that in some cases you're going to have a bit of back and forth between different political actors in the system.
Yeah.
What I think is problematic here is that right now the chair of the committee is basically operating with one hand behind his back, and he's choosing to do that to himself in a way. And when it comes to the report, I mean, as I've written about in the past, I've found a lot of their conclusions sometimes to be a bit over the top.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's where some people are landing on this. So it would be good to have, again, all party leaders take a look at it and give us their views. Luckily, we have Blanchette, who's going to have a third view, and that would be useful as well.
Yeah, although he's made a point of saying he's only going to deal with issues of his own caucus. He's not going to weigh in on anything else because he doesn't want to politicize. Well, he says he doesn't want to politicize the issue, but it's also he doesn't want to create a tension with the commission. And I think this kind of goes to the same thing you were saying about we imbue these commissions or these former judges with all of this power and expect a definitive response out of it. I mean, you know that I have particular critiques around certain officers of parliament around this and the deference by which not only politicians but media give them unnecessarily in many cases. But I'm sensing a lot of that same thing happening here too.
Yeah, and again, it could be that the committee has reviewed a significant amount of intelligence. I don't think anybody's doubting that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubts that they've done thorough work. And at the end of the day, though, part of the problem when it comes to this, and this is exactly the issue that is coming up, is it does rely on the political leaders to deal with it, because unless there's criminality involved. And political leaders are unfortunately going to come to different conclusions about how they want to deal with this. That's just the unfortunate reality of the process right now. And I know that, a lot of people would just want the names named, and there's avenues to do that, and people are still not doing it. I mean, we just saw Quan come out today and say, well, the name should be released. Well, her leader has read the report. He can get up in Parliament and in the House of Commons and just say the names. Like, there's no magic formula here. I don't think it's advisable to do that, but everybody seems to once again be kind of skirting around the actual limits of parliamentary privilege around this.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to just kind of touch on is going back to the notion about, this is a political problem, and once again we've tried to take a political problem and foist it on a judge, but knowing that she really can't do anything about it and they're just kicking the can down the road. But yeah, that we keep circling back to this notion about opposition leaders insisting that their hands would be tied, and how this is basically shaping this narrative.
Right. I mean, I think it's that you're always going to have this tension in the same way that you have it between the Crown and Parliament when it comes to national security issues generally.
Yeah.
You listeners will recall Peter Milliken's admonition that the Commons and the Crown ultimately had to come to some kind of practical arrangement when it came to Afghan detainees.
Mm-hmm.
And similar thing happened around Winnipeg Labs. And basically we're running into the same problem here, where it's not going to be a perfect solution, but you do have to figure out a way to balance all these different points of view and responsibilities. When it comes to opposition leaders, as Blanchette has kind of hinted, the bare minimum to ask of them is to at least be able to address what's happening in their own caucus.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bind them when it comes to other things. So if they only want to be briefed on what's going on in their own caucus, maybe that's a possibility. Paul Bier has kind of hinted at that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are different solutions. It just depends on the level of creativity that we adopt around it.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at or thinking about like the Afghan detainee model or the Winnipeg Labs model, part of what makes that acceptable is, again, this panel of former judges that kind of arbitrates amongst themselves. And is this something that we might have to think about in terms of getting the four leaders in a room together and with a judge or two and hashing this out?
I don't think it's going to be an issue in this case, to be honest. I think this is where, why the delaying tactic with Hogue, it kind of makes sense for the parties. They just are foisting it over to somebody else. And potentially this becomes part of a wider recommendation from Hogue on nomination races and how parties have to kind of arrange themselves.
Yeah.
And as much as we're all kind of chomping at the bit here, we want names, we want, to deal with this immediately. That deals with kind of the immediate symptom, right, of the problem. But if you're going to tackle the underlying root causes as well, you do need to figure out how political parties are going to deal with this new reality. And I think this is where it's very interesting to me because political parties are very quick to haul the head of PHAC before the bar, or to use parliamentary privilege in other ways, or get rid of a CDS and then whatever,
Yeah.
right? But when it comes to them, when it comes to when politicians have to police themselves,
Yeah.
suddenly suddenly everybody's reputation and everybody's and things are very complicated, and
Yeah.
you can't get unduly involved. And I think that's what we're really dealing with at this particular juncture. We're dealing with a reckoning that's coming to how political parties in Canada deal with this issue, and they're being pushed way out of their comfort zone, and they haven't woken up yet to how they're going to deal with this.
Do you have any international examples of how similar things were handled in either the UK or Australia or possibly New Zealand?
I don't have detailed examples. I know that it exists. It's come across in my research, but this is far from a uniquely Canadian problem. This is very well understood. It's well understood in Japan as well. This is not unique to Canada. And it really does, again, I'm not an expert in that aspect of it, but I will say at the end of the day, if parties want to maintain their kind of private club status, they're going to need to figure out how to deal with this without having to bring in outside actors.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's the choice that they face. Either they clean themselves up, or it's going to reach such a point where a heavy hand is going to come in and clean it up for them.
Yeah, and I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago about how we really don't want Elections Canada to have to expand as much as it would have to in order to do this kind of policing activity.
Well, this is it. I mean, I think political parties need to, they need to figure out what they can do and what they need to do uh, themselves so that they can show that they have some degree of responsibility here. And right now, the party leaders and the political parties are not covering themselves in glory here. It's not a major issue yet in the public's eye because
Hmm.
other things are kind of dwarfing it. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to eventually address this, it will just become a deeper and deeper problem, and the solution is going to be much harsher and much more difficult for the parties to swallow.
Yeah, that need for adult conversations within the room always winds up being where you need to go in the end, and no matter how much you want to avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, and we'll do this again in the future.
Sounds good there.
All right.
Take care.
And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale_no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.